not a host
Sorry.
in this segment. Okay, that was Colin Gow with our theme song podcast. We always appreciate Colin, the great owner of Colin's Coffee, doing our theme song. We are switching it up on this episode a little bit. So our guest today is sitting in a different chair than he normally sits. And no, we have not given Brian Hedge a mic. Darren Schulman is sitting in the guest chair, and we have a special guest
co-host.
I was not going to call
temporary co-host.
A special co-host for our opening segment, the one, the only, Jackie Thiel. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. So glad to finally be back. I made episode 1 and 2, had a long hiatus, and now episode 8, I'm back.
You're back.
And I just got to comment on the commitment to realism.
Have we asked you any questions? You're not allowed.
He made me move my chair
We haven't
to
even
the guest chair.
introduced you yet.
He took
guest
off
Darren.
made me take off the sweater physically and move seat location so I would be in the guest chair. I'm sorry, I was not asked a question.
No.
When you do things professionally, there's a system, right? I mean, it's just like any great football coach. He has his system, and you practice like you play, Darren. Come on.
I appreciate the realism, commitment. On an audio-only thing, we have to make sure everyone knows I'm not the host.
Well, before we introduce our guest, I would like to comment that I see you guys still have the same red sweaters. So no one brought you sweaters?
Nobody brought us sweaters. We put out our thing. But you know what's more important than not getting any sweaters? So today is the 4th of May, the day after.
May the 4th be with you.
The day
Star
after.
Wars Day, Steve.
You know what? Actually, I was going to talk right over that. But I will.
But I would not let you.
You would never come back as a guest again. Our last guest was Beth Hatch, of the executive director of the Upper Arlington Library. And she had, and her team had, and our community had a very big night last night, in that the library levy passed. When I looked at it at 11 o'clock last night, it was like 75% in favor. I don't know if that changed much.
Yeah, I looked this morning, it was 76%.
So huge congratulations to Beth and to her fantastic volunteer board of directors and her amazing staff for running a great campaign and doing the work to keep a community asset viable and make some really key improvements to it. So kudos to them. And I'm sure that they were probably only polling at about 45% until they got on the podcast. And Beth, you're welcome. Happy to do it for you anytime you've got a levy coming on. We'll have you on the pod and we'll put you over the top again.
She was on other podcasts too that might have put her over the top.
No.
I'm just saying that she was.
So, Jackie, how would you feel about being a permanent co-host? Because Schulman's just...
Maybe Schulman goes to the sidekick and I stay permanent co-host. I don't know. Just an idea. Just throwing it out there.
I'm not even allowed to talk as the guest unless asked a question, so I can't defend myself.
So let's get into having Darren talk about what we want to talk to him about today. Today is all about, not all about, but largely about conflict.
Obviously.
And how do we resolve conflict? Clearly, we've got conflict here.
We do.
And as we've talked about in the past, and our last opening episode, which was Everybody Hates Chad, we get conflict in our neighborhoods from time to time. But we don't just simply throw up our hands at the city of Upper Arlington. We do have a program to get in there and work with our residents who are willing to work with us and work with their neighbors to resolve conflict. And that program resides in Darren's office. And so therefore, we have Darren on in the staff guest seat today to talk a little bit about conflict resolution.
So yeah, Steve, most people might think...
most people would thank us for having them on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, Steve. It's a pleasure to finally join this illustrious group of interviewers. I appreciate the opportunity. When people think of the city legal department, they probably think of maybe me sitting at council writing legislation, or hopefully not, but maybe our mayor's court if they've gotten a speeding ticket or something like that. But we also have a mediation program through the city attorney's office. Our mediator is Joe Roush. and he is there basically to act as a service to the community to help people resolve not big picture, cities on cities conflict, but more of a neighbor disputes, things of that nature, roommates, neighbors, things like that. They come to us in many different ways, but basically he's there. If you accept our service, it's free. He helps you work together to resolve your problems amicably, as opposed to using the court system or something like that.
So what's Joe's background? What kind of gives him, where's his skill set coming from to do this stuff?
Joe is a multi-talented employee in our department. He's kind of one of our glue guys. So Joe is our diversion manager. He does our probation, and he also does our juvenile diversion program. So he's used to working with conflict. Prior to working for us, he worked downtown at the probation department down at Franklin County. So he's been in this kind of system for a long time. He's been doing this since, many, many years before you were here. I was here. Jackie, was he here when you were here, when you started? Joe's been here, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Super long time. Yep. So he is kind of for the people who know him, he is kind of one of the jewels of the community. He really helps, I think, probably with that juvenile diversion program especially, where you have an option of getting charged as a juvenile with a crime, but if you work with him, you can kind of turn your life around and avoid that charge, but become productive and avoid getting future problems. So he's been doing this for a while. He's very good at it. The big key for Joe is you have to take part. He will offer mediation in certain circumstances, and people are like, I don't feel like it, or they'll come in not really bought in, and he can't work miracles, but he's very good at it. I would like to say that there are a lot of ways that you can get to this mediation program. So the typical ways that we see are neighbor disputes. They might turn to either the legal department or the planning department, Chad's department, and ask, hey, my neighbor's raking leaves on my yard, or my neighbor's keeps parking their car in front of my house. You need to do something. And the city's hands really are kind of tied on those things. And so when those conflicts are bubbling up, we offer the mediation, kind of try to route them through that to help them resolve it without filing police reports and things like that. I guess the second way they come is through, sometimes people want to file police charges. Maybe there's not really a crime that fits. It's more just you guys are just mad at each other. And again, the police are very good at routing them to us. Maybe Joe can help you. We talked about neighbors. We talked with leaves and things, but also dogs. So barking dogs happens more than you would think. Dogs, maybe a shared wall or close yards, dog driving the other neighbor crazy. Joe can work with you to help resolve that dispute.
So I know that, working with our community, there's all sorts of different personalities out there, and sometimes those personalities might live next to each other and not always get along. And, there's been instances where I've been called and neighbors have security cameras pointing at each other's properties, or they put a sign on their fence just to make their neighbor upset. In those cases, do both the neighbors have to agree to come to this, or can we force anything?
That's a great question. So to do mediation, both in principle to make it work, but also in practice, both parties have to be willing to participate. And for it to work, you have to kind of both be bought in, because if someone's just sitting there, I'm here because I have to be, they're not going to be able to reach a resolution. With that said, in terms of levers, the example you provided, let's say someone is pointing a camera at someone's yard, they're messing with the fence. Sometimes those behaviors do violate maybe one of our zoning code requirements, our building code requirements. So they might actually face, it would seem like a ticky-tack violation, but they might be facing a violation notice from Everyone Hates Chad's planning department. And so we could say, look, you're about to get cited for putting this sign up on your fence that's too high, or you can do mediation, actually get to the bottom of why you're putting that up there. For example, if someone's putting a camera in your house, there's probably some deeper things going on, like why are they putting a camera into your, what is a deeper issue as opposed to just that camera? And so it might benefit both of them to do it, and there might be that little hook, which is you don't have to participate, but if you don't, you might get a violation notice.
Yeah.
So you talk about both parties being willing to come in and take the process seriously. Are there things where you look at it and beyond just simply saying, hey, you got to be willing to come to work on this, are there certain kinds of issues where, whether it's with Joe or in your other experience doing mediation, you did have a work life and life before joining this job 2 years ago. Are there other things that kind of in that conflict resolution, dispute resolution sphere that you've seen are key to getting problems solved? Are there certain kinds of problems that are more amenable to this technique?
I think one thing that is usually underlying a lot of these sort of disputes is there's a lot of emotion built into it, and sometimes it's been going on so long that you're very mad, but you don't actually remember what started it because it's been boiling for so long, and there was a slight, and then the other person felt slighted, and they don't even remember why. So sometimes it's trying to figure out really what do you want out of this? What is a comfort level? Because I got to say, from personal experience, living with that conflict, even if it just always weighs on you. So, if you're having problems with your neighbor, does it really feel comfortable to have to walk across the other side of the street so you don't have to see him because you hate him so much? Wouldn't it be better just to figure out how we can live together? And maybe that resolution is we're just not going to talk to each other because we don't get along, but we're both cool with that. It doesn't have to be your buddies going out drinking beer every weekend, but it could just be we're going to get to that point where we know what the ground rules are, and as long as we both live with those ground rules, we're both fine, even if we're not going to talk. So I think going in with just an understanding that you're not going to get everything you want, but what can you walk away with happy, and maybe trying to take a little bit of that emotion out of it, and that's what Joe can help you with. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish? I know you're mad at them, but what do you want? Because you're going to be better off getting that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So what would you tell residents not to do? Like, I'm mad at my neighbor. I'm not going to resort to physical bodily violence against them. I know that. So short of that, what would what are some of the dumb things that you see people do when they're mad at their neighbors that makes it harder to help them?
I think sometimes when people, I call it passive aggressive, but they're trying to get back at somebody in a kind of, I'm going to do something that's not punching them, but I'm just going to really try to annoy them in a way that I think is legal. So, they don't want you on their property, so you walk up and down the line of the property, or they don't want you putting stuff on their property, so you put it right up on the property line, or they complain that I was too loud, so I honk my horn every morning before I go to work just because I can. Stuff like that where, yeah, I guess you can do that, but you're just building up a lot of negative energy. Mm-hmm. So we just see a lot of people get mad, and so they're just going to do something, and I think it might make them feel better in the moment. Like, I'm going to get them back by doing this thing, which I know is legal, but it's terribly annoying. And that just escalates the situation. Right when that incident first starts, maybe reach out, because we can probably try to resolve it before it gets to that continued arms race of passive-aggressive behavior that just keeps escalating.
Yeah, use your energy in a positive way instead of making the situation worse. And, something I've recognized, too, is, don't try to catch them in an act and call the police, and put our staff, whether it's zoning or police, in a situation where we really shouldn't have been called. It maybe wasn't an emergency just because you're trying to get back at somebody. But instead, they can use our mediation service.
That's a great point, Jackie, because to my example of the guy walking up and down the property line, or could be a gal on a neighbor's property, well, then the neighbor retaliates by putting up a camera, and they're looking for that 1 second the person's foot stepped over on their property, and then they're calling the police. Well, guess what, gang? Police is not going to come out and arrest your neighbor because they cut across the corner of your yard. Like, I know technically the law says it's a trespass, but we got better things to do. So the police and the planning department don't need to be getting involved in these things that aren't really serious, because it takes away from the real things we got to do.
Yeah, especially when you have this service in-house. I think it's great for our community to be able to take advantage of.
One more thing I'd like to throw out there. I talked about being ready. We've had numerous situations where we've offered the mediation, and I think it might have been just too soon or too raw, and one or both of the parties like, no, I don't need mediation, I just don't like them. At least 4 times since I've been here, people have come back and said, maybe mediation would work. Now, that's great, we'll take you, but think about all the stuff that's happened and the emotional energy that's built up over that extra months that could have been resolved if you just kind of step back and said, maybe I'll try it earlier on.
Although, and what I would also say, what I would hope our residents would do with that is recognize if you're not ready at the time, be willing to say, hey, I cannot sit in the same room as this person right now. Give me a few weeks. If we can all just have a cooling off period for a few weeks.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Yeah, let's. But I'm not ready to sit across the table from that person. Otherwise, you will have an assault charge.
And that would be a perfect response, as opposed to just, I don't have anything to mediate. It's their problem. Are they going to come and tell me they were wrong? That's not really mediation. We have had that happen. I'll mediate if they're willing to admit they were wrong. It's not really how it works.
What's your best mediation story, or Joe's, if he's ever shared something with you from anywhere in Central Ohio he's heard of?
I have a mediation story that I'll scrub with all the details, but I just kind of referenced it. But you go into mediation, and this is as a person going into mediation or a lawyer going to mediation. You go in, you kind of always want to prepare. What can I do to help reach a resolution? And so I was in a mediation, and the other party was basically like, well, you just got to give me what I want. And I was like, well, I mean, that's not how mediation works. You got to come with something, right? And they didn't. And then as it went on, their offers were getting worse. Like, well, okay, now you're going to give me what I want, and you got to add this thing that I wasn't even asking for. And I was like, that's really not how it works. But okay, thanks for trying. And the mediator literally said, they're kind of crazy. Mediators don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, mediators don't. They're not judging. They don't pick sides. They'll never tell you you're right. I mean, people want to pitch to the mediator, tell me I'm right? And they don't do it. They're very good at trained not to do that. But this one was just like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. You might as well just go home.
Yeah, I think you have to understand, if you're agreeing to mediation, you're going to have to give a little bit. Both sides have to give and come to a mutual understanding.
And that was one where we were mediating over like a thing.
Yeah.
It's different than like a typical neighbor dispute. It's really more about the relationship. They're not really fighting over the leaves or the cutting across the yard. There's something else that set that off. So I think those are probably easier to mediate in terms of like, why are you upset with each other and how can you be friendly, as opposed to kind of more of a lawyer thing where we're fighting over this pie and now all of a sudden you want the whole pie plus something that wasn't even in it. But yeah, that's happened to me before.
So thank you, Darren, for switching seats.
Literally
switching seats.
Thank you, Steve, for having me as your co-host. It was a pleasure.
It was awesome to have you back. I know that if I ever just get so frustrated with Darren that I've got to permanently kick him out, I know I have an option.
Mm-hmm.
I just love how, first of all, I'm supposed to be
grateful. She completely
grateful.
didn't play into that
I'm
underhanded way.
No, because here's the deal. People should know this. Steve has been instrumental in not having Jackie on. And so he's like playing it up to like Jackie is like here on his graces.
When I talked earlier about, having that moment where you say, I'm not ready for this, but then ready. Coming back later and saying, now I'm ready. This is an example.
I'm not ready. So you're ready for Jackie now?
Mm-hmm.
I was, yes, I'm the one who invited her on. Yes.
We need Joe to help mediate our podcast.
Right.
I'm cool with it. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm cool. If you want to admit that you're wrong, and
quit the show, then we're good.
We're good. That is not a good example of how mediation works. No.
All right. So we are going to stay with the conflict resolution theme going here. Our next, we're going to have on Carl Smallwood with the Divided Community Project at OSU. I will preview for you that one of the things we did not give Carl the opportunity to do is give contact information for his project. So the easiest way to find it is search OSU Divided Community Project if you're interested in learning a little bit more about it after you listen to the podcast.
We're gonna have a podcast. Yeah.
We are back. We're here today with Carl Smallwood. Carl is a longtime resident and the executive director of the Divided Communities Project at OSU. We dressed a little differently today because Carl, when he sent in his profile, said that he was aware of bow ties. I have mine on with a white shirt. Darren went with this very strange red sweater vest, Magic Mike Chippendales kind of thing, where he's just got on the bow tie and no he took the sleeves off of his sweater and nothing underneath the sweater. It's a little
look.
It's an interesting look.
You said bow tie. I didn't know what you were going for.
Yeah, right. So. We talked about for the Start Bench Cut doing famous people who wore bow ties, and Darren, I guess, got on the whole Magic Mike Chippendales thing.
I was going from the old Chris Farley Saturday Night Live skit with him and Patrick Swayze. That's a dated reference. But
it is dated. Complete aside, I went and saw is it David Spade? Who did I go see this week?
David Spade.
David Spade. Yeah, I went and saw David Spade.
You can tell we're a good team. I'm answering your questions
Yeah.
for you now, and
Okay, so we do have a guest here today,
This is
by the way.
frightening.
who's
okay.
now leaving. He's walking out the door.
Why am I here? Carl's here with us, and Carl, you said you've listened to a few of these, so you know we have a introductory set of questions for you, our start bench cut. We're going to do something we've never done before.
Okay.
We're going to give you the same start bench cut that we've given someone else, and we're going to see.
We're going to grade you.
We're going to see how you come out and see whether we have a problem. And this is the same one. This is the same start bench cut we gave our first guest, and it is because you said one of your musical genres was Motown and funk.
Uh-huh.
Stevie Wonder,
Uh-huh.
Earth, Wind and Fire, George Clinton.
Well, I've seen Earth, Wind, and Fire live, so I probably put them up top. I can't cut Stevie Wonder.
We have complete and perfect alignment.
He must
I
be good.
I love George Clinton, but I can't cut Stevie Wonder.
I feel bad for George Clinton.
I do.
He's unanimously gone.
He is. This is awful. People with dreadlocks and crazy outfits everywhere, just kind of
No.
crying.
Can't be about that. No.
So this is a good sign though, because
He was setting you up.
I was setting this up because your job is in some ways in dispute resolution, not really in dispute resolution, but looking at areas of conflict, and you just completely avoided one. We thought we were going to set up a huge, big controversy with Floyd, and here it is, and you completely avoid it.
He was trying to set up a conflict with a guest who's not here to defend himself, just for the sole purpose of avoiding or to resolving that conflict.
Yes, exactly. Why don't you tell us? Why don't you start a little bit with what is the Divided Communities Project?
Sure.
And walk us through that.
Yeah, the Divided Community Project is a group at the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. Began about 6 years ago when people who do dispute resolution work and dispute resolution design raised the question of whether there was a role for people who do this kind of work to assist communities that are divided racially, ethnically, religiously, and other dimensions of diversity that cause conflict and unrest in communities. And they looked at it through the lens of Sanford, Florida, where Trayvon Martin was killed a little over 10 years ago this year. And Sanford, Florida got through the aftermath of the Trayvon Martin shooting. The trial, protests involving 30,000 people, and some unrest without a single arrest, without property damage, handling national and international attention. And so having looked at that, they put together some lessons that could be learned and adapted by other communities facing that kind of issue. And more importantly, perhaps, than assisting communities that are in the midst of community unrest, was helping communities plan in advance, to take a more proactive approach. And so over the course of the last 6 years, we do a number of things. We have direct consultation and intervention services, similar to what the Department of Justice Community Relations Service does. They're referred to as America's Peacemakers, and we have two of the former regional directors of the Community Relations Service as contractors who work with us to help communities that are in crisis or facing conflict. We have hosted academies for the last 3 years to bring leadership teams from communities and universities together to both examine how they respond to conflict and to think about planning in advance of conflict. And there's been no lack of work. I began my work with the Divided Community Project 1 week before George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in 2020. So I thought I'd be drinking from a fire hose, and it has been exactly that. But I feel good about the work we try to do to help communities.
I'm curious about. I think it's obvious when a community is in crisis, they need help. But you've mentioned a couple times advanced planning, laying the groundwork. So, who would be a good community, or what kind of factors would someone maybe want to reach out before something happens? How would we know that this might be something we should use on the front end?
Yeah, I think many communities experience sort of some kind of sentinel event that causes conflict, and that's when they reach out. But to your point, if you find yourself with issues that are essentially bubbling under the surface, that demonstrate there is division within your community, and we live in really polarized times right now. I mean, politically polarized, social issues, polarized communities. If you find that the community is not functioning as well as productively and positively as it should be, reach out.
Do you find it easier for a community to get involved kind of early on that front end, or to wait until that, I think you called it a sentinel event, happens?
Yeah, no, I clearly
Should we just kind of wait it out until something happens? Or, you know?
Let's just do crisis communication.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope, well, you know, we have limited staff, so in that respect, I guess we can't serve every community all the time, and all of our services are provided free of charge. We have funders who believe in this work and support this work, and permit us to do it, so that the communities that call us for assistance are not charged for our services. But it's obviously better if you can plan for an event. And one of the tools we use is a simulation, sort of like a national security simulation that you might think of, that the Department of Defense or some others would run. We've developed something similar for communities facing, in the aftermath of a police shooting, in the aftermath of protests that relate to immigration issues, those kinds of things, to get the attention of the leadership team, to let them face an issue in real time with events unfolding in real time, see how they deal with it. And then after you begin to unpack how they dealt with it, you ask the question, if you had 6 months to prepare, what would you do? And the answer generally is, we would want to create some of the relationships that we don't currently have. We would want those to become trusted relationships so that we can reach out to different stakeholders in the community and make certain that we are addressing the needs of the community before they reach a crisis point.
I'm interested in learning a little bit more about you as a person. This is a fascinating project, but how did you come to this field? Because you said this has been around since, not too long. So what did you do before this?
Oh, what did I do? Well, well,
sounds like a lot.
I graduated from Upper Arlington High School, and then I went to law school. I went to college and law school here, and interestingly, teachers can have a great effect on you. I now work very closely with someone who was my first year law school teacher. She was a baby law professor, and I was a baby law student. Her name is Nancy Rogers, and she's a longtime Arlington resident. I practiced law for 40 years. I did civil litigation, and retired from that at the end of 2018. Played for about a year, decided it was time to do something else. I also cared for a sister during that time period, but returned to something and made the comment in Nancy's presence that I was looking for the next thing. And she has had projects over the years that have been of interest. She knows I have a deep interest in issues relating to diversity and inclusion, creating opportunities, resolving disputes. I think lawyers are problem solvers,
Steve, we're problem solvers.
I know, Steve, you think we create the problems and then solve them.
No,
but
I will give, I don't give Darren credit a lot. I try and avoid it at all cost. However, I will say he kind of in an inside counsel role. He really, he gets the problem solving role.
Right, and that's the thing. A lot of lawyers get publicity and notoriety, I guess, but the truth is, you can be incredibly effective resolving issues without all of the noise and I like to think over the course of almost 40 years when I was practicing law that I did that. I mean, I was a trial lawyer. Trial is a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. There are other and better ways to resolve disputes, and I tried to find ways to do that when I was practicing, and I try to do that now.
So I need some advice, by the way. I have Darren, but Darren's not the only lawyer I work with. I have 6 out of my 7 council members are attorneys. One of whom you used to work with, as I understand, is a pretty good litigator himself.
He recently argued before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes, and his decision hasn't gotten leaked. Now, I don't know that many people are really worried about
the clerk who leaked. It's like, okay, I can leak this decision about insurance or whatever, or I can leak Roe v. Wade.
Yeah,
I don't know which one.
I can leak Roe v. Wade, or I can leak reimbursement for
like dialysis.
Dialysis, that's it.
That's what people are clamoring for.
That's what people were clamoring for. I hope Kulowitz doesn't listen to this, but I tried to listen to that, and man, I got lost. I will say this: I listened to some of it, and listening to John, he gets a question. He's like, "Yes, if you'll recall, on page 583 in your brief, opposing counsel argued this." He knew page, chapter, verse of the I was like, "Wow, okay, I know. I'm never." If I didn't know it before that, I know never to try and BS John Kulowitz, because he's going to know the facts better than.
Well, and Carl can back me up on this, but going to the Supreme Court is like the highest thing you can do as a litigator, at least. And
right.
Like you have to be pretty smart to pull that off. Like
right.
If you're a dope, you don't stumble into the Supreme Court very often. So
it's a very small class of or group of lawyers who've had that privilege.
So back to my initial question.
Sure.
Man. Help me out. I got 6 out of 7 lawyers.
Sounds,
what did Jim Lynch and I do? I mean,
I don't know what you did, but I guess you probably need a 7th one just to be able to break the tie.
So that's Jim Lynch is our one non-lawyer. So I think he sits it. He's the one who sits.
Well, and that's probably a good way of doing it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, we made joke. Darren does indeed have a shirt on.
I do, not really wearing a Chippendales outfit.
He's not really going Chippendales today. So the point being, our listeners can't see. You are a black man. You grew up here. I think my understanding is you moved here when you were like in middle school.
I moved here when I was in beginning of high school.
Okay.
But the high school was then a 3-year high school with 2,100 students.
So, what changes? How was that experience growing up in a minority in a community that, from its outset, had some things that said, we had deed restrictions. We had, and when Kristen Greenberg was on, she talked about these issues.
I like how you referenced earlier episodes. Now people have to go back and download that one too. And we're not going to tell you which one. You got to download all the episodes.
No, I was going to tell them that was episode 4.
Okay.
See, I am listener friendly.
I'm not. I just want clicks.
So, talk to us a little bit about kind of that experience and how you've seen the community change over the years.
Yeah, my parents bought a home in Upper Arlington in 1970, and when I came to school here, I was one of a handful of black students in a student body of about 2,100 students. My senior year, I think I was one of 2 black students in a school of 2,100. I have a very close group of friends that I developed at Upper Arlington. We were soccer players. I was a member of the debate team, and some of those friendships have endured for 40 years. I have since the pandemic, we've had a weekly Zoom call with a group of about 10 of us who went to high school and played soccer together and became, fast friends. It was lonely. It was challenging to be sort of that different at a time, not long after the civil rights era. But I found many of the students to be friendly, and I had teachers who, a number of them, who were very instrumental in making sure that I was able to not only survive but thrive. That sort of, and my life has been a little bit about being on sort of both sides of that color line. Being born and living, I was born in Greece, but setting that aside for a minute, moving back to D.C., my dad was at Howard, so lived in a black community. Then moved to Germany for 9 years, was in a white community for 9 years, moved back here, went to a private school for about a year that was an all-black private school, came to Upper Arlington, where I was one in very many, and then went to Ohio State, which was a little bit more diverse. And so that, as I said, I've been on both sides of that as a minority and as a member of a majority group. And so I guess it gives me an appreciation and ability to kind of bridge those experiences and those communities in some ways. So I don't know that I'd trade what I had here. I don't want to say it was easy, but it was critical to becoming who I am.
When you look at the community today, what do you see that gives you hope for the future? Not that we're in. I don't want to say gives you hope.
Yeah.
Besides this podcast.
Yeah. Well, this has got to be in the top 3, right? Okay.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Show's over.
That's that. Okay. Yeah. I have an abundance mentality, and I guess I'm optimistic about the future of Upper Arlington. It has changed over the years, slowly. When I bought my home in 1991, I found one of those deed restrictions. We wrote it out of the deed. It was unenforceable, of course, but again, it was just sort of okay, yeah, that's part of the history of the community. It's changed over the years, so that the number of students of color are greater now than they were then. But race isn't the only dimension of diversity in Upper Arlington schools, and I think that there's an opportunity for growth. You've got smart people in this community. You've got people who've been very fortunate in life, and if we don't approach this as a zero-sum game, if we approach this as an opportunity to learn from each other, to thrive together and to grow, I'm optimistic that some of what is always made Upper Arlington great in some ways will make it even better.
So we always finish with 2 questions, and I'm going to make you work because I kind of gave you a little bit of this question, but I'm going to make you answer it a second way. What do you love about UA? What would you change about UA?
I love many aspects of the quality of life. Parks, libraries. The school is very good. I've not been in the new high school yet, but I'll get a chance at some point. Its proximity to downtown and to Ohio State, I've found a community in Upper Arlington that I really enjoy, and there's a lot to like. Yeah, I'm sorry, was there a second part to the question?
No, you don't need to answer the second part to the question. The second part to the question is, what would you change?
Oh, okay, got it. I didn't mention city services and all. Yeah, so for those of you, continue to sort of plow my street. Okay. Yeah, I love you guys. Okay. I'm sorry, what would I change? I guess I would hope for Arlington that as I said, in the passion that exists in these polarized times, that people would find a way to listen to each other more deeply and openly, so that we can grow into the 21st century city that Arlington can become. I mean, given the tools it's already working with, some of the areas that I find not fully satisfying, diversity, and that's racial, economic, a number of dimensions. I look forward to Arlington addressing those the way you'd sort of want them addressed, so that, as I said, in the 21st century, it's a place everybody would want to live and feel comfortable living, and be proud to occupy.
It's interesting that you bring that up about kind of place where everybody wants to live. We just 2 weeks ago, actually it was 2 weeks ago.
Retreat?
Yeah.
Yep.
Went on a retreat with our senior staff, and that a place where everybody wants to live was one of the things that came up among our staff in terms of, if you were to summarize in a single parsimonious sentence, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's trying to be a place where we said, unless you want to have farm animals,
then you can't live
was
here.
the qualifier.
If you want horses, no.
If you want horses or pigs or chickens, this might not be the best place for you.
And like all our other services, that came at no charge.
That was pretty funny. No, we are moving. That's one of the things that really does kind of animate us and say, this is where we can go. And the other thing that I love, and I know Darren loves about working in this community, is we do have accomplished, educated, diverse, more diverse than sometimes we realize, as we talked about earlier, and certainly diverse in thought, residents who, when we take the time to come together and really work on something, we typically make progress on it. It's bumpy, but we tend to make progress on things. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come on today and continuing to work for the good stuff in the community. I think is this podcast number 9? 8. We are 8 for 8 in terms of people on what they would change.
Not saying the radio show.
The city manager and the city attorney. So Thank you for keeping us on point with that, and thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right, take care.
Podcast.